So welcome everybody. I know this is a topic that is on the crazy train a little bit right now, where everybody's kind of bobbing in. And one of the things that we always want to remember is really thinking about starting with the experience. So what I'll talk about a little bit today, and maybe stimulate some thinking around thinking about really an intelligent experience. And I'll explain what that means as we walk through the presentation today. It's good to take a perspective of from the CEOs, those individuals who are making decisions about how brands are adjusting to all of the changes and disruptions that are happening today. And so with AI, if you think about all the things that we've been through, there's this thrill of all the things that were just talked about, the potential and the impact that this can have. But that's balanced really with how an organization needs to discover what is right for them and right for their customers, and keeping up with the leaders in the space, right? The difference between leaders and laggers is there's a ability to really think about where you're headed, where you're going, and in those headwinds of all this craziness to really make clear decisions about where you're headed, where you're going, and why. They're also, CEOs today are thinking more about capabilities of the organization than they are about the functions within an organization. So capability building for artificial intelligence and discovering how the impact that can have is a capability I'll talk about a little bit today. They're also rewiring their organizations. We've seen organizations go through complete org designs, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of changing the way the organization works internally, how connected the business and technology are, how the teams are connected to each other. So we're seeing this broader scope of what AI is really driving in, although we've been through it many times before, that there's a shift in how organizations need to work and their ways of working and the culture that they create. They're also building superpowers for their people. Making sure that everybody has that talent and that acquisition. And I'll talk a little bit about that's a key factor in AI and how you make these changes. And then really thinking about change leadership. So everybody talks about change management, but when we think about change leadership, it is the ability for those who are helping to make decisions to be bold and be brave and be curious and really thinking about what we'll call the horizon scanning of what's coming down the path, not just making decisions for today to be AI and machine learning and use all the things which are great, but how is that going to be incorporated into the way your organization works and thinks, and what's going to change? And really making it transformative AI and not what I call snackable, like applying it here and there. It's great to pilot that, but you have to have a strategy and a plan for moving forward. So these are some of the things that we see CEOs in organizations. We hear them talk about AI in a different way. But what, of course, they're also saying is that, well, I really have to care for, I know, my organization and where they're headed. And so the other thing that we're seeing is instead of these silos of strategies where we have the care team doing something, we have the marketing team doing something, that they're implementing AI, these silos of strategies have to align. They have to come together. It's more of what we call an operating system. It's really how the organization defines things differently from the beginning so that the strategies of how we adopt AI and how we build experiences are not diverse in the organization. Everyone's aligned to that common piece. And there's been nothing more important over the last few years than trying to align the organization. And AI is doing that simply because of the pace of change and the skill sets required and the ability to adapt and get to where you need to be. So if you think about Brian Solis years ago said this about what he calls digital Darwinism, it's when technology and society evolve faster than the ability for companies to adapt. So what we talked about at the beginning was all these changes with AI and how you introduce it and how you leverage it, and where you leverage it, and do you leverage it for employees and customers, and how you're designing and thinking about those experiences that are using AI, even with other AI. So Serti, to your point about machine customers, it's not just about how we're serving those individual customers we're used to, but also other brands and machine customers as well. So the challenge here is if this has implemented a lot of speed. How do we not lose sight of the things that we want to do and how we're going to engage our employees and customers? So this is where we start to see organizations who are saying, wait a minute, I know it's important for the experience, and I know that emotions are important because I have experiences every day. How do we make sure that we're thinking about the emotion and the reasoning behind how we choose AI and how we leverage machine learning? And thinking about how where this emotion and the reason or the functional things that we do collide, and that creates a sustainable fuel for engagement. Because if we automate everything and it's all functional and it's all about reason and left brain thinking, we're going to end up in a void where we won't engage customers, and they're going to be looking for a brand who is quicker, smarter, faster, stronger without that emotional element. And that's what's going to be the differentiation. And we don't want to lose that. You'll read a lot today about emotions and how using AI and emotions can be read through AI and looking at the data and really getting the sentiment behind it in real time. These things are important because we do have to understand the impact that the emotion is creating and the value that it's creating for our customers. And what I say is, we've been through this before. So those of you who are a little bit more mature in age, like myself, we've seen this happen several times in thinking about our organizations and thinking about the experiences we're creating. When computing came along, day one, it really shifted, but organizations weren't ready, and they didn't adapt it very quickly. The same thing happened with social. I remember sitting in a Gartner event when social was first launching, and everybody was up in arms and frantic about what it was going to do and how do we put privacy and how is this going to impact our organization. And we didn't stop and really think about how we could leverage it from that human perspective. Digital transformation came about, and it was digital for digital's sake. Great to find things that you can automate, great to put digital into lots of things, but now we're seeing companies go back and say, yeah, we built it digital, but we really didn't think about the long-term impact to our customers and what was going to happen. So history will repeat itself until we learn. So now we see with AI and machine learning, are we going to be organizations that are still experience-centric, enabled by the technology, so that it's clearly evident to us the experiences we're creating and the behaviors that it's driving? With the advent of AI, to even look at the behaviors and understand it and drill down into where customers are struggling, what they need and how they need it, is a use of AI. But we don't want to, again, lose that human element on. There's nothing better than reading the replies or looking at data and information or having a conversation with the customer that tells you more about where they're headed and what they want to do, versus watching the AI chew on the information. Even though it's fairly smart, it's only as smart as the data goes into it. And that emotion and reason get a little lost on AI. Because we think about, if we don't understand and we don't engage and move customers to more positive states, that we're going to have an opportunity in our organization. We call this emotional conversion. I know a lot of you may have tried a chatbot or an AI assistant, and I found it very much a struggle, especially as AI it's been around a long time, obviously, but as it came more into mainstream and we were seeing more of it and people rushing to market to make sure that they could demonstrate that they were doing AI, quote unquote, we saw this push it out there, but they hadn't really cared for the emotional experience or actually figured out unhappy paths. If somebody was going through, like my situation with the chatbot at one point, was it kept asking me the same question over and over again. Sending me to the website and asking me the question again wasn't going to make it better. As a matter of fact, my emotions got even more frustrated with the organization because I was there to get help for something and it made it worse. So we have to think about how engaging and moving customers to that more positive state is part of thinking about how we leverage AI and why we're leveraging AI. It can do a lot of things, but if it doesn't we don't consider how the emotion is cared for in those experiences, again, we're back to square one and we're going to miss all the lessons we learned about other technologies coming into play. So what we're seeing organizations do is, there was a recent study on this, and I'll share it after the webinar, is that we're seeing more neuroscience, anthropology, psychology coming into play in organizations that are struggling with how they do keep that human element into their AI and machine learning. Because in the end, that's who's leveraging, that's who's paying the bills, that's still the target, is how we create engaged employees and engaged customers that are driving our business results. And so when you think about what the CEOs are facing and how they're making decisions, part of it is we need to really understand in a deeper way how humans are consuming AI, leveraging it, and their perception of what it means when we say, hey, we're going to put something out there. What's the perception and an emotional element behind it? So we're seeing them bring these disciplines, which are much more human-based, into the organization to influence and learn. So I want to talk a little bit about this intelligent experience thoughts to consider. And sorry about the build on this one, it got a little broken. The first one is really the power play between experience management and tech. This couldn't be more critical. If you think about an organization, the two parts of the organization that typically have a holistic purview is an experience management team and a technology team, because we're working end to end. And so the power play of us coming together to really think through how we're going to create strategies that are going to align to the needs of the human, as well as leverage the AI, not only now, but for the future, is critical. It requires us to have new talent. Expanding AI and EI, emotional intelligence, and SI, social intelligence. Because as we get things more automated, we are spending more time in the trends we're seeing. We're spending more time with friends and family because it's freeing up our time to go be more social. And after COVID, of course, traveling a lot more and being more social. So we have to be aware that of the new talent that's required, not just for AI and tech, but also for this emotional and social intelligence that we need to leverage. The need for operating models at scale. So expanding on what I call spot AI, this how you make it snackable, you're applying it here and there, but what's the end state, and building with that scaling in mind, because it's not going to be one thing. If we don't define it appropriately, we're going to end up with a buffet of AI tools and technologies and data that isn't being leveraged holistically. Also thinking about horizon scanning for really true value creation. Horizon scanning is a technique and a talent that allows somebody in the organization, many people typically, to really be thinking about the 3 to 5 year plan. Now, strategy teams do that often, but what we're saying is, how do we really think about the horizon of what AI and tech are going to do? And how are we skating where the puck is going rather than taking the day-to-day today? So part of that whole piece with AI is the reactive, responsive kind of, we got to get it done and we got to, put it everywhere we can. It's being thoughtful and intelligent about how you look to the future and where you're going to create value that's going to be different from your competitors. This strategic design of using design not only in creating the experiences, but also on the organization. So some of you talked about how AI is being used for employees to make them smarter, to get to really augment and accentuate what they already do. So using design on the organization, in other words, how should you be organized? What are the elements that you need to provide to your employees, and how you're going to work differently with AI and machine learning and make decisions differently around it. So we're seeing a lot more of this coming in strategic design. And remembering that intelligence is only as good as the data and insights it can access. So over the years, most of the times when we work with organizations, their data is a mess. It's all over the place. It's not clean. There's no governance. Lots of organizations have gotten better about it. But if we think about AI and machine learning, it requires you to be phenomenally specific about what you need to do with your data and how it needs to feed the organization as well as the AI machines. And then thinking about how we address this data and insight dysphoria, this kind of dissatisfaction with how insights really get generated and how we use those insights to focus our investments and our leadership to really scale. So thinking about the question to ask yourself is, how are we using the data generated by AI to get to the right insights, to get to the right action. Having more data and having more insights from AI isn't good if you don't have an insights process and you're not turning that into action and turning that into value. So thinking about a new lens for intelligent experience. So we talk about artificial intelligence, but what I want you to think about today is there are different types of intelligence that you need in your organization in order to make it more successful, to bring those pieces together and to really use the information you have today, thinking about the future to build your new organization. So I'll leave that with you to think about the intelligent experience. You can contact me here. I'm happy to answer questions, and we're going to answer some right now. And also in the book Experience 5 and new book just released on the Experience Operating System, talk about these concepts. So I'll turn it back over to you, Aim, for questions.
Yeah, I've got a quick one before everyone please come back on. We'll go through the general questions. But I've got one for you very quickly here. There's a TV program in England called, oh God, I can't remember what it's called, but the comedy part of it is someone walks in and the lady behind the counter just taps her hands on the keyboard and says, the computer says no. Now, that kind of experience, how do you stop AI, or how do you train a chatbot or AI to understand that kind of a machine robotic response isn't friendly, isn't helpful? How can they measure because they can't see the eyes or the tone of the person on the other side who might be distressed. How do you overcome that challenge?
Well, we are seeing AI tackle some of those things like facial recognition and reading an emotional state. That's been around for a long time. And those of you who shop anywhere probably have been in a store where they're recording your facial reactions to get, look at what you're feeling and what you're trying on and where your eye goes and the facial expression when you look at something. So I think we'll get there to use that. I just don't think it's there yet. We're still kind of focused on the functional. But I think this is where it comes into play for certain, where you're designing how the tech is going to handle these things, but are we still designing the human experience? So if that experience comes into play and somebody walks in, what if they don't want to have that conversation? There are people who don't have the conversation, they want service, but there's those of like myself who want to go in and have a conversation. It's part of the richness of the purchasing experience. It's part of learning about the product, and how do you build that? So again, we're always on the mantra of what experience are you trying to create, and then how are you enabling it with technology?